Have you ever noticed that after 60, the fear of death seems to gain more weight? During youth, we talked about it almost as if it was something distant, reserved for others. But after 62, this ghost begins to approach with firm steps. It's as if time, once so generous, now becomes a silent reminder. One day it will be your turn. The question is, does this fear need to paralyze us? The curious thing is that many avoid talking about it. They change the subject, look away, occupy themselves with distractions, as if silence were a shield capable of preventing the inevitable arrival. But silence doesn't solve it. In the back of the mind, the question remains, persistent. What happens when the last breath comes? And it is precisely at this point that Edgar Cayce's vision can offer us a key that changes everything. Perhaps you've never heard of him, or perhaps you've heard his name in passing without paying much attention. Cayce was called the Sleeping Prophet, a simple man without much education who went down in history not for theory, but for experience. He would enter deep trance states, and from there answer questions ranging from physical illnesses to the greatest mysteries of life and death. Thousands of accounts were documented, and within them is a vision capable of transforming how you face your end. Before revealing it, think with me. Why is the fear of death so suffocating after a certain age? One reason is evident. When we pass 62, many of us have already lost close friends, family members, perhaps even a life partner. Each farewell acts as a mirror. The coffin, the wake, the flowers. Everything points to the same conclusion. Soon, it will be me there. And this realization is hard. It's not distant philosophy. It's a reality that touches the skin. Another reason is the weight of time. At 30, we think, I still have a lot ahead of me. At 40, we say, I'm halfway there. But at 62, that math changes. Even with health, even with vitality, we know that future time is no longer greater than time lived. It is at this moment that many begin to feel a constant shadow, the fear of ceasing to exist. But Edgar Cayce brings a surprising twist. For him, death is not an end. It is merely a change of state. And I'm not talking about a pretty phrase to console. He described death as a process as natural as waking from a deep sleep. Imagine this. You fall asleep, and when you wake up, you are simply in another place, with another consciousness, but still you. There is no loss of identity. There is no void, only transition. Perhaps you are thinking, but how can I believe that? That is the big question. Belief without foundation doesn't sustain anyone for long. What makes Cayce's vision so intriguing is that his readings were done in front of witnesses, recorded in minutes, analyzed by doctors and scholars. When he described people who had already passed, he spoke of details that no one else had revealed, and these details were confirmed. What this shows us is that we are not dealing with a loose idea, but with repeated and documented experiences. And here I want to invite you to reflect in silence for a moment. What would your life be like today if the fear of death did not exist? Think calmly. If you knew that death is not destruction but merely continuing in another room, how would your way of waking up in the morning change? How would your relationship with the future change? This simple vision already begins to weaken the weight of fear. But beware, it's not about denying pain. Death brings longing, and longing is inevitable. The difference lies in understanding that absence is only physical, not definitive. Cayce said that the spirit remains active, having experiences, learning, reuniting with loved ones who passed before. It is not the end of a story, it is just a chapter turned. And when we understand this, something within us begins to calm down. Now, let me open a small parenthesis. Perhaps you are watching this video not just out of curiosity, but because you feel this anguish in your chest. Perhaps you have spent sleepless nights imagining what your last day will be like, or you are afraid to fall asleep and not wake up. This is not weakness, it is human. All of us, in silence, carry this weight. But I want you to know, you are not alone in this. The simple fact of being here already shows that you seek clarity, and that is already a huge step. And there is a curious detail in Cayce's vision. He claimed that the fear of death arises from a lack of memory. It sounds strange, but I will explain. According to him, We have all experienced death before in other existences. We already know this process. We have already lived the transition. The problem is that we don't remember. This natural amnesia makes us feel as if it's the first time, and that's why fear appears. But deep down, it's like going through a door we already know, even if we don't consciously remember it. This idea changes everything, because if we've already been through it, then there's no reason to panic. And perhaps that's why young children, in some accounts, speak of memories from other lives, describe people and places they've never seen, as if this memory, still fresh, escapes before being erased. For Cayce, the soul does not die. It merely changes attire. The body is clothing and life continues. I know this revelation may sound comforting, but also raise doubts. After all, what if it's just imagination? What if it's a comfort created to alleviate fear? That's a fair question, and I don't want you to ignore it. On the contrary, I want you to carry it with you until the end of this video, because the definitive answer will only make sense when we piece together what Cayce left behind. Until then, think of it as a serious hypothesis, not as blind faith. And here we return to the starting point. After 62, the fear of death can paralyze. It can prevent us from enjoying the present. It can turn every birthday into a reminder of loss. It can rob us of the joy of simply being alive. But if there is a real chance that death is just a passage, then there is also a real chance that we can live our last years in peace without this constant weight. Therefore, I invite you to continue with me, because what Cayce revealed is not just a theory about what happens after the last breath. It is above all a way to live better today. And that perhaps is the greatest gift his vision can offer us. Do you remember the last time you woke up from a dream so vivid that for a few moments you couldn't distinguish whether you were in the real world or still dreaming? This sense of continuity, almost as if one world were an extension of the other, is the key to understanding how Cayce described death. He said that dying is as natural as waking up, but with a difference. Instead of waking up in the same bed, you awaken in another reality, broader, lighter, but still profoundly familiar. This vision is surprising because it dismantles the most frightening idea of death, that it would be a blackout, an absolute nothingness. The fear of emptiness is what paralyzes most. After all, how can we accept that everything we feel, think, and love would simply disappear in a second? Cayce responded firmly, "That doesn't happen." According to him, consciousness is indestructible. It does not depend on the brain, just as electricity does not depend on the light bulb to exist. The light bulb can break, but the energy continues. And here a curious detail emerges. People who underwent near-death experiences long after Cayce reported exactly this. They describe leaving the body, observing doctors trying to resuscitate them, feeling an indescribable peace, and realizing that they remained conscious. Even if science is still seeking explanations for these accounts, they echo what Cayce had already said decades earlier. It is not a coincidence. It is as if there is a universal truth that repeats itself in different contexts. But if death is not an end, what awaits us on the other side? This is the question many avoid because they fear the answer. Cayce described that, upon crossing the threshold, we are not met by strangers or by instantaneous judgments of punishment. We are met by familiar faces. Parents, friends, siblings, deceased partners appear, not as memories but in real presence. He said that this reunion is so striking that it dissolves much of the fear. Imagine seeing someone you lost decades ago, someone for whom you still hold love. This image by itself transforms our way of facing the end. Of course, an inevitable doubt arises here. What about the mistakes we made and the guilt we carry? It's not uncommon that after 62, a flood of memories resurfaces, words left unsaid, apologies that remained in silence, choices that could have been different. This weight increases the fear of death, because the mind creates images of punishments and demands. But Cayce affirmed something different. For him, what we face after death is not an external tribunal, but an internal mirror. This mirror is a life review, where every act, every word, every gesture returns not as an accusation, but as understanding. You feel directly the impact your attitudes had on others. If you offered love, you feel that love again. If you hurt someone, you feel the pain you caused. There are no judges, only reflected truth. This review is not punishment, it is learning. And this detail completely changes the weight of guilt, because instead of thinking about eternal condemnation, you understand that life is a school and death is merely changing classrooms. This leads us to an essential point. Many elderly people live their last years fearing the reckoning, but Cayce's vision shows us that it is not a reckoning to destroy, but to reconstruct. He said that the soul continues to evolve, that no mistake is definitive, and that everyone will have new chances to learn. This idea of reincarnation, so common in Eastern traditions, appeared spontaneously in his readings, even without him having direct contact with these philosophies. It is as if he was accessing a universal truth that transcends cultures. And if that is the case, then death ceases to be the end of the line. It becomes a bend in the road, a return, an interval, a preparation for the next journey. And this simple change in perspective can liberate, because suddenly the mistakes we made no longer seem like a final sentence. They become part of a larger process, where there will always be an opportunity to mend and grow. Now think with me. How many times have you felt that life gave you second chances? How many times did you believe something was lost, and yet an unexpected opportunity arose? This logic, which we already see here, continues beyond death. What you didn't conclude now, you can conclude later. The love you didn't express, you can express in another life. The word you didn't say, you can say in a future reunion. This understanding reduces the weight of urgency and restores serenity. But make no mistake, it's not an excuse to live carelessly. On the contrary, according to Cayce, what we do here is fundamental to what we will experience later. There is no end, but there are consequences. Every gesture is a seed that germinates, and the field where it will grow can be this life or the next. That is why, by understanding death as transition, we also understand life as responsibility. Fear gives way to consciousness. And here's a point that might surprise you. Cayce said that the fear of death not only paralyzes, but also shortens life. This is because the body reacts to emotions, anxiety, anguish, stress. All of this weakens the organism, corrodes vital energy. In contrast, those who accept death as a natural part of existence live more lightly, more healthily, more present. It's almost ironic. By ceasing to fear death, we prolong life. Perhaps that's why people with strong faith, regardless of religion, often face the end with serenity. They believe in something beyond, and this belief acts as a remedy against despair. Cayce reinforces this same principle, but in a way that unites faith and experience. He didn't ask them to believe for belief's sake. He described, reported, detailed. It was as if he was saying, "Do not fear because I have seen, and at this point, I want to create space for you to reflect again." When you think about your own death, what frightens you most? The unknown, the longing, or the sense of loss of identity? Identifying what weighs most is the first step to liberation. Because if the greatest fear is the unknown, Cayce's vision responds clearly. There is nothing to fear because there is no void. If it's longing, remember there will be a reunion. If it's the loss of identity, know that you will continue to be you, just on another plane. What Cayce offers us is not just hope, but also logic. It is a vision that connects with accounts from different cultures, with modern near-death experiences, and with the silent intuition that, at some point, we have all felt. That life cannot be just this brief interval between birth and death. There is something greater, and that something awaits us. Imagine yourself at a train station. You're sitting on a bench, looking at the tracks that seem to disappear into the horizon. Suddenly the whistle blows and a train approaches. You board, and as the car begins to move, you realize you're leaving behind the station where you spent so much time. This is the symbol Cayce used to describe death. Not an end, but a departure. The station doesn't cease to exist, you're just no longer in it. And the train continues, taking you to the next destination. This image is simple but powerful, because it shows something we forget. Life is made of departures and arrivals from the very beginning. When we are born, we leave the mother's womb. It was painful, frightening, but necessary. Later, we leave childhood to enter youth. Every transition brought fear and at the same time new possibilities. Why would death be any different? It's just another passage. And here's a detail Cayce emphasized. There is no loneliness on this journey. The greatest fear of many elderly people is imagining themselves alone at the moment of departure. But according to him, no one dies alone. Familiar spirits, dear friends, even spiritual guides are present to welcome those who cross the threshold. He said that this welcome is so real that it instantly dissolves anguish. What seemed like darkness becomes an encounter. Now perhaps you are asking yourself, if all this is true, why do I still feel so much fear? This is a fair question, and the answer lies in how we were educated. From an early age, we learn to value what is visible, palpable, scientific. Death, not being measurable in a laboratory, is treated as a mystery without an answer. We grew up without maps for this territory. And it's natural that in the face of the unknown, the mind fills the void with fear. Cayce offered a map, and the more we look at it, the more we realize that the path is not what we imagined. One of the most surprising points of his readings is the idea of immediate continuity. He affirmed that immediately after death, consciousness awakens with even greater clarity than before. There is no confusion, no memory loss. On the contrary, the mind becomes more lucid, capable of understanding aspects of life that were previously obscured. Imagine waking from a dream and suddenly understanding the meaning of everything you lived. This is what he described, and it doesn't stop there. Cayce also said that those who remain can feel the presence of those who have departed. How many times have you had the feeling that a loved one was nearby? A perfume that suddenly appears, a memory that comes without reason, a dream so real it seemed like an encounter. For him, these are not accidents, but signs. The veil that separates the worlds is not as thick as we think. There is communication, there is proximity, there is continuity of bonds. This opens up a fascinating question. If life continues, and if we can still connect with those who have departed, then death does not steal the bonds we have built. On the contrary, it strengthens them on another level. Cayce reported that many spirits remain close to their families, not to scare but to protect, guide, inspire. They become, in a way, invisible companions. Knowing this transforms the pain of longing into something bearable, because it reminds us that separation is only temporary. But there is another aspect that needs to be said. Cayce warned that excessive attachment to fear can hinder the transition. When someone departs in despair, clinging to life as one refuses to let go of the edge of the pool, the passage becomes more difficult. It's like trying to sleep in the middle of a nightmare. Therefore, he insisted on the importance of preparing the mind for death while we are still alive. It's not about living obsessed with the end, but about cultivating serenity in the face of it. And here I pause to ask you, have you ever allowed yourself to talk openly about your own death? Many shy away from this topic, as if it were an invitation to misfortune. But those who talk about it, who reflect on it, gain a freedom that others do not have. Death ceases to be a taboo and becomes a natural event, as natural as birth. This exercise by itself reduces anxiety and brings peace. One of the practices recommended by Cayce was daily prayer, not in a ritualistic sense, but as an alignment of the soul. He said that the habit of conversing with the divine, whatever name you give to it, strengthens the spirit for the moment of passage. It's like training for a long journey. When it arrives, you are already prepared. This preparation gives confidence, and confidence is the antidote to fear. Another point he highlighted was the value of service to others. Cayce said that by caring for other people, by alleviating their pains, by offering love, we are actually building a safe path for ourselves. Because in the mirror of life, what returns is exactly what we offer. If we spread kindness, it is kindness that will welcome us on the other shore. This practical perspective shows that every gesture has eternal weight, and that living well is the best preparation for dying in peace. And it is here that I want to extend a special invitation to you. If this video has brought you some comfort so far, if it has opened space for new reflections, how about continuing this journey with me? Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, because this is just one chapter of a much larger conversation about life, death, and meaning. This way we can walk together without rushing, deepening every aspect that Cayce left us as a legacy. Returning to his vision, there is still a detail few know. He said that after death, each soul goes through a period of rest. It's as if it were a pause between one life and another, a time for assimilation. In this interval, the soul reviews its learnings, reunites with loved ones, and prepares for the next challenges. This phase is not rushed nor forced. It is respectful, adapted to each one's rhythm. This pause is, by itself, a consolation. We don't need to fear an abrupt transition because there will be time to adjust. And perhaps here lies the greatest secret. Death, for Cayce, is not an enemy, but an ally. It frees the soul from the limitations of the body. It opens horizons that the human mind cannot imagine. It's like leaving a dark room and suddenly being in front of an illuminated landscape. The body says goodbye, but the essence continues fuller than ever. This perspective can completely transform the way you live your days now, because if death is just a passage, then there's no reason to live in despair. On the contrary, there are reasons to live more intensely, enjoying every moment, every encounter, every gesture. Fear diminishes, gratitude increases, and that, deep down, is what we all seek: peace. Perhaps throughout this video, you have already felt the weight of fear transform into something lighter. In the beginning, we talked about how, after 62, death becomes a constant, sometimes suffocating presence. But now, after exploring Edgar Cayce's vision, perhaps you are realizing that this fear no longer needs to be a paralyzing burden. It can, in fact, become a silent teacher that teaches us to live more consciously. Cayce said that life is like a school that never closes its doors. Each existence is a classroom. When we learn what we need, we change rooms. Death, in this sense, is just the passage from one class to another. There is no expulsion, no eternal failure, only continuity. This means that nothing we experience is lost. Every act of kindness, every tear of pain, every sincere smile, everything remains recorded in the soul as learning. This vision is liberating because it shows us that we don't need to be afraid of failing in life. Many elderly people carry the anguish of not having achieved everything they dreamed of, or of having made mistakes they can no longer correct. But Cayce reminds us, the story doesn't end here. There will still be new opportunities, new encounters, new chances to do better. This understanding dissolves despair and invites us to live the present with serenity. And yet, even knowing this, a question remains. If life continues, what is the purpose of being here now? This is the central question Cayce emphasized so much. He said that the goal is not just to survive or accumulate possessions, but to evolve spiritually, to learn to love more broadly, to forgive more sincerely, to serve more generously. Every difficult situation we face, every loss, every challenge, is an opportunity for growth. Nothing is by chance. Think for a moment about the most significant moments in your life. Many of them, perhaps, were not the easiest. They were illnesses overcome, painful farewells, difficult decisions. But it was precisely these moments that shaped who you are today. Death, as viewed by Cayce, is the continuation of this same process. It is not punishment, it is evolution. And when we understand this, fear loses its power. Another point Cayce emphasized is that preparation for death does not begin in old age. It begins now, with every choice we make, by cultivating gratitude, by seeking reconciliation with those we have hurt. By living according to our deepest values, we are, without realizing it, building the bridge we will one day cross. This bridge is not made of stones or wood, but of attitudes. And the stronger it is, the more peaceful the crossing will be. Perhaps you are thinking, but I'm still afraid of the moment itself, of the pain, of the farewell. This concern is natural. Cayce said that physical death in itself is much simpler than we imagine. The body may suffer, but consciousness detaches before the pain becomes unbearable. For those departing, the process is gentler than it appears to those observing. It's like leaving behind a tight shoe. The instant it comes off, comes relief. And for those who remain, the pain of longing is inevitable, but it can be transformed. Cayce said that remembering with love, speaking with affection, and even conversing in thought with those who have departed are real ways to maintain the bond. Death does not erase relationships, it merely changes how they happen. This certainty gives strength to carry on, even on the most difficult days. Now let me ask you a direct question. What would you like to feel on your last day? Peace, gratitude, serenity, knowing you lived the best way possible. This answer is personal, but there is a common path we can all follow. Cayce said that the key to a peaceful death is a life aligned with love. Love is not an abstract ideal, but a daily practice. It's in listening patiently, in offering help, in forgiving when it seems impossible. These attitudes build the most important legacy, not what we leave in the bank or the house, but what we leave in the hearts of others. And it is here that his vision finds its greatest strength. Death does not need to be seen as an enemy, but as part of the natural cycle of existence. When we accept this, something changes profoundly. Anxiety diminishes. Each morning we wake up no longer with the fear of the end, but with the joy of continuity. And upon the last breath, instead of despair, we feel only the confidence of one who knows they are embarking on a journey home. I want now to open an intimate parenthesis with you. Perhaps you are watching this video alone, in silence, with thoughts you rarely share. Perhaps even with tears in your eyes, remembering someone who has departed or imagining your own end. I want you to know that this silence is not empty. It is space for revelation. The fear you feel does not need to be hidden. It can be embraced. And when embraced, it transforms. Cayce showed us that we are not walking towards nothingness, but towards reunion. We are not going into darkness, but into light. We are not losing. We are merely changing planes. And if this is true, then we can rest in peace while still alive, because what awaits us is not destruction, but continuity. It is not absence, but presence in another form. Therefore, my final word to you in this video is an invitation. Allow yourself to live the years you still have without carrying the weight of fear. Exchange fear for curiosity, for gratitude, for trust. And remember, death is just a transit station, and life, this life you are living now, is a precious opportunity to learn, to love, and to leave a mark of light in the world. If this message has touched you in any way, I ask you, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, share this video. Not just to support this work, but so that more people of your age who carry the same anxieties can find this same relief. Together we can transform fear into peace and uncertainty into hope, because no one needs to walk alone before this mystery. And when the last day comes, may you remember Edgar Cayce's words, "Death is not the end, it is merely waking up in another reality." May this thought be kept in your heart, not as theory but as silent certainty. Thus the life that remains will become lighter, and the crossing, when it comes, will be serene.